Now it's time for Lefties Losing It, and good news from Canada, where the king of performative caring, the neo-Marxist Ken Dole himself, Justin Trudeau, is floundering in the polls, and he's now lashing out at people rejecting far-left parties.
We have seen around the world a rise of populist right-wing forces in just about every democracy that we've seen.
Rita Panahi, a new Sky newscaster, has openly criticized Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister, stressing how another viewpoint is provided by foreign news sources free of his funding. She started by jokingly calling Trudeau the king of performative caring.
So there you go. The swing to the right is all due to anger, fear, division and anxiety, precisely what Trudeau pushed with his hard left policies for the past 9 years.
His poll results clearly show his difficulties. She notes how he's now hitting out at people rejecting far-left parties. Trudeau notes that populist right-wing movements are rising globally and links this to anger, fear, division, and worry. Panahi responds by implying that these are exactly the feelings Trudeau has encouraged with his initiatives throughout the last 9 years.
This is the monster who falsely branded Canadian truckers as extremists and white supremacists and then froze their bank accounts. Adios, Fidel Jr.
She reminds viewers of his dubious behavior, including suspending their bank accounts and smearing Canadian truckers as white nationalists and radicals.
This week, his party lost a by-election in one of the safest Liberal seats in the country, in Toronto, St. Paul, and Trudeau's minority government is badly trailing the Conservatives in the polls.
Pointing to Trudeau's party's recent defeat in a by-election in one of its safest districts in Toronto, Panahi emphasizes his diminishing appeal. Given his minority government lags behind the Conservatives in surveys, Panahi wonders whether this spells the end of his political career.
You absolutely put your finger on it, Rita. Performative caring. That's all that Justin Trudeau does. It's very hard to find a true thing he's ever said or a sincere thing he's ever said.
She brings in Douglas, another pundit who shares her opinion. Now, Douglas notes that Canadians have at last witnessed Trudeau's performative caring, which he characterizes as lacking depth.
The man is entirely artifice. He's an utter bimbo, a phrase that maybe one wouldn't use of a female politician these days, but I'm happy to use of Justin Trudeau. He's so grotesquely... He's a himbo, I suppose.
Douglas goes into further detail on Trudeau's dishonesty, calling him an utter bimbo and claiming that people throughout Canada now hate him.
Really impressive opposition now. I think that Pierre Poilievre and the others on the Conservative side that are coming along, they're very impressive people are now facing off against Trudeau. I think he's absolutely toast.
He compliments the growing opposition leaders, such as Pierre Poilievre, who he considers to be Trudeau's strong rival. Douglas says Trudeau's time is running out, as his facade cannot deceive Canadians anymore. While Trudeau was once a media darling, Panahi and Douglas talk about how his initiatives have not really benefited people.
Superannuated drama teacher. Turns out you can fool some people for a little while, but not for all that long.
The conversation moves to Trudeau's reputation as a sympathetic and caring leader. Now, they contend that his reputation has helped him to get away with sometimes nasty and damaging policies.
He was the biggest media darling in the world there for quite some time, though, Douglas. He had a very long honeymoon indeed. Him and Jacinda Ardern and you beautifully described them with that tag of performative caring.
They underlined the need to realize this veneer and make authorities accountable for their deeds. Panahi says he finds it frustrating that the Canadian media needs more bravery to examine Trudeau as closely as his Australian colleagues.
I was in Canada last week in a couple of cities, and I can't tell you, Rita, the detestation that you find for Trudeau across the political board.
Douglas muses about his most recent trip to Canada, where he saw general discontent with Trudeau. With many Canadians ready for Trudeau to resign, he characterizes the prevalent attitude as one of disgust. Douglas thinks Trudeau's leadership is being challenged by resistance from people like Pierre. Among voters, he observes that these fresh leaders are acquiring popularity and credibility.
Policies they instituted, they weren't helping people, but they were fated as these new age leaders who were full of compassion and empathy. But yeah, there's not much of that.
Panahi and Douglas talk about Trudeau's leadership style's wider consequences. They contend that when people get disappointed with conventional political discourse, his method has helped populist right-wing groups grow. According to Panahi, people have turned to more extreme choices because Trudeau neglected to address pressing problems.
It's interesting, Rita, isn't it? And people should be aware of this. The amount you can get away with that is cruel and sometimes evil if you wrap it up in this particular style of politics. As long as you come across all lovey and sort of, silken haired, whether it's Ardern or Trudeau, you can do the most vicious things to your public, and wow, did they do it.
The discussion then turns to Trudeau's initiative's financial effects. Panahi attacks his administration for enacting policies that haven't been able to handle economic difficulties sufficiently. She draws attention to the hardships experienced by common Canadians dealing with growing expenses and financial uncertainties. According to Panahi, Trudeau's emphasis on performative care has ignored the demands of the people.
He was gifted $80,000 worth of free accommodations at the villa of a Trudeau Foundation donor. That's what anyone else would have had to pay to stay there over that 9-day vacation. Now, he has a big IOU to those Trudeau Foundation donors, who will obviously be expecting something in return for.
Over in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been under heavy fire for his conduct, especially from rising right-wing political star Pierre. The leader of the opposition launched a sharp critique of Justin, alleging that he accepted $80,000 worth of free accommodations from a Trudeau Foundation donor, equivalent to what any other person would have to pay for the same 9-day vacation. This act, according to the leader of the opposition, implies that Trudeau now holds a significant obligation towards these donors, who will likely expect something in return. In contrast, ordinary Canadians pay for their vacations, prompting the leader of the opposition to question whether Trudeau will repay this $80,000 gift.
Mr. Speaker, I went away with my family and my kids to stay with friends that we have known for decades in a place that I have stayed at many times over the past decades since I was 1 year old, Mr. Speaker. But of course, in all these situations, we work with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all the rules are followed, and that happened in this case.
Trudeau responded by explaining that he went on vacation with his family and children to stay with friends he had known for decades. He stressed that he had visited this location many times since childhood, and that these friends are practically family, having shared close bonds for over 50 years. Trudeau emphasized that all ethical guidelines were followed in collaboration with the Ethics Commission, ensuring that all rules were adhered to in this case. He also noted that all necessary protocols for prime ministerial travel, including mandatory security, were respected.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, nobody is raising qualms with the Prime Minister having a vacation. I know it's his favorite thing to do. I had a vacation at the same time. It was a Sunwing package, and I did stay 5 hours waiting at the airport. But that being said, I paid for it myself.
The leader of the opposition clarified that he does not oppose the Prime Minister taking vacations, sharing his own experience of a recent vacation where he paid for his own stay. He underscored that he's not asking Trudeau to cover costs related to security or the private jet, but simply to pay the same price any other family would for such a stay. This would ensure Trudeau doesn't owe any favors to wealthy donors.
We're not asking for the Prime Minister to pay for the security. We're not even asking him to pay for his private jet. We're simply asking him to pay the same price any other family who stayed at that resort would pay, so that he doesn't owe anybody anything. Will he pay back that $80,000?
Leader of the opposition further highlighted that accepting such a substantial gift from Trudeau Foundation donors based in Bermuda could lead to unique influence over the Prime Minister, urging Trudeau to repay the amount to eliminate any potential conflict of interest.
The Leader of the Opposition's friends who buy him a cup of coffee. I think the Canadians are worried about his billionaire friends that he's using to attack local news for Canadians right across the country.
In a pointed rebuttal, Trudeau suggested that Canadians are more concerned about the Leader of the Opposition's ties to billionaire friends who allegedly undermine local news and Canadian culture. He criticized the opposition for involving American tech giants in their efforts to attack Canadian institutions, stating that these connections pose a greater concern than his vacation arrangements.
BC has brought him to involve American tech giants to try and attack the local news, the local culture, the francophone news that Canadians rely on from coast to coast to coast. Yes, we have our disagreements in this place, but when he goes running to his billionaire tech giant friends to try and attack Canadian institutions, Canadians should be asking tough questions of this leader.
Trudeau accused the Leader of the Opposition of seeking support from these billionaire allies to damage vital Canadian news outlets and cultural institutions that serve Canadians nationwide. Prime Minister Trudeau's actions highlight a troubling disregard for ethical boundaries, cloaking potential conflicts of interest under the guise of family traditions. The Leader of the Opposition rightfully calls for transparency and accountability, questioning the propriety of accepting such gifts. This situation underscores the critical need for integrity and leadership and the ever-present influence of wealth and politics. So what are your thoughts on this unfolding drama? Let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.